Good morning and welcome to today's building webinar produced in association with Rockwool, which is going to delve into the hugely topical issue of retrofit and estate regeneration. My name is Joey Gardner and I'm Deputy Editor of Building Magazine, and I'll be chairing today's discussion. For the residents and managers of large estates, maintaining, upgrading and regenerating them has never really been off the agenda. However, after more than a decade of centrally subsidised investment made under New Labour's Decent Homes programme, halted last Parliament, you could be forgiven for thinking that it had almost completely fallen off the government's agenda. However, in recent months, that has seemingly all changed. Firstly, with the intervention of Chancellor George Osborne, who set aside up to £2.3 billion worth of loans for estate regeneration in his autumn statement. And then this month has seen the announcement by Prime Minister David Cameron of a renewed focus and £140 million extra for the 100 most deprived estates. However, there is still much to work out, with the government seeming to imply that it is more interested in the wholesale redevelopment of estates than in their upgrading through planned maintenance and retrofit. In addition, many of the subsidies and incentives for greening social housing schemes, such as the Green Deal, for example, have been cancelled, making the finances potentially more difficult to stack up. Now, with us to discuss all these issues, I've got a great panel of speakers. Darren Snaith at materials firm Rockwool, John Stapleton at consultant Sustainable Homes, and David Lawrence of contractor Lawtech. But before I introduce them properly, can I just remind you all that after the presentations we should have around 20 to 30 minutes for a Q&A in which we want as many questions from you, the listeners, as possible. You can post questions using the interactive displays at any time during the presentations, and the system will save them until the Q&A. So if you're inspired or confused by anything any of our speakers have said, please don't hesitate to post questions straight away. So, without further ado, I will pass over to our first speaker, Darren Snaith, who is Director of Refurbishment and Regeneration at insulation supplier Rockwool. Darren is going to talk about the benefits of a whole house approach to regeneration and the role of insulation in upgrading the performance of homes. Over to you, Darren.
Thank you, Joey. Rockwool is the world's largest stone wool insulation manufacturer, with our UK factory based in Bridgend in South Wales. We make and supply a full range of smart and sustainable insulation products for the construction industry based on innovative stone wool technology. Rockwool's unique combination of outstanding fire, acoustic and thermal insulation properties, as well as unrivaled sustainability credentials, has seen our products installed in domestic, commercial and industrial buildings of all types. It is a significant challenge for many asset or energy sustainability managers to prepare and present a convincing investment-grade business case to their boards in order to secure large capital investments in retrofit. However, recognising that retrofit investments translate into direct financial benefits for social housing landlords is a starting point. These include energy savings. The first and most obvious gain from retrofit projects is in improving the thermal performance of buildings, which not only helps to save residents money on their energy bills, but is also a critical factor in ensuring good health and well-being. Property value. From a landlord's perspective, another important benefit from undertaking retrofit work is a rise in asset value. For example, if you improve an average home's EPC rating from D to B, this translates into an average asset value increase of 6%. Rental income. Work is currently being undertaken by Sustainable Homes, and I'm sure you'll hear more about this later from John, into how retrofit projects and the savings they generate for residents translates into lower incidence of rent arrears for landlords. Maintenance and void costs. By improving the fabric of a building, this also results in benefits connected to building maintenance, again bringing down the costs for landlords. Community benefits. Lastly, as the government acknowledged in their announcement last week on estate regeneration, good design is a critical role to play in fostering good community relations. And by following a community needs-based approach, which is followed through in the design specification of the project, The community can benefit not only from warmer homes, but a smarter appearance to the neighbourhood and reduced noise. David Lawrence will be covering this a little later in the webinar in greater detail from a contractor's perspective. There are many different aspects to a retrofit project, and insulation has an important role to play. The choice of materials used is also an important design question that should link to the desired project outcomes. For example, along with improving the thermal performance, stone wool insulation provides a variety of natural mineral properties, including fire resistance, exceptional fire protection for improved building and occupant safety during and after the installation process. We offer an A2 class, Euro class non-combustible system with no restrictions on building type or heights based on fire. Dimensional stability. Made from stone, Rockwool performs for the lifetime of the building and does not expand or contract or degrade, continuing to perform year after year. Moisture repellency and vapour permeability. Rockwool stone wool repels water. Exposure to leaks or rain will result in water simply running off the surface and draining away. However, Rockwool insulation is also breathable, so will allow trapped moisture to pass through and escape. As stone wool contains zero nutrient content, it resists rot and mould. Superior acoustics. The special fibrous nature of Rockwool helps reduce and dampen noise from both inside and outside the building, creating a more comfortable living environment. Noise is an increasing antisocial behaviour issue, and something which can be tackled by using the right materials on the retrofit project. We work with the Noise Abatement Society on our products and are delighted to have been awarded the Quiet Mark seal of approval. Additional benefits could also include improved aesthetic appearance. We offer a range of finishes from silicon, dash, brick effect and real brick slips. In addition to the product properties, refurbishment is a cost-effective solution to demolition and reconstruction, causing less disruption to communities and residents, whilst also extending the lifetime of the building. To ensure the successful delivery of a project, Rockwool provides support and tools to ensure a smooth total project delivery. For instance, pre-project, we'll help you develop a business case by coming to support and look at your individual property types and assess these using our return on investment tool. This can provide a before installation and after installation assessment of energy savings and actual money saved. We can help with design and planning. We have an in-house architectural technologist who helps with all design and detailing issues. We also provide pre-project assessments and surveys. During the project delivery stage, we like to get involved in community liaison with community open days, meeting the tenants and explaining what's going on. We also can provide bespoke logistics solutions to each project, and during the project, all the installations are monitored by our installer support team. These work with our accredited national installer network to ensure a quality installation. Post-project, we provide an installation sign-off service where we inspect every property that's been installed, and we can field post-project review meetings. We can also provide maintenance training, often to DLOs of social housing providers. And any offcuts from the installation process can be taken back to our factory in Bridgend and be recycled to be turned back again into Rockwool. Wilmcote House is also an excellent example of the benefits of a refurbishment approach over wholesale demolition and rebuilding. By working closely with residents to understand their needs and issues related to fuel poverty and lack of thermal comfort, and assessing the design options for achieving upgraded thermal acoustic performance, the local authority were able to avoid the significant cost and community disruption associated with demolition. Settling upon a scheme to super-insulate the residential parts of the block working towards Retrofit standard, which is the refurbishment equivalent of passive house, and extending the life of the building by a minimum of 30 years.
Darren, thank you very much for that fascinating presentation there. I think a lot of interesting points about how the business case for doing these kind of refurbishment and retrofit schemes is so important, and how this kind of approach can help you build that business case, which is always one of the most vital things you're trying to do as a landlord faced with that situation. I would like to remind all the viewers before I go on to the next presentation that again, it's your opportunity to ask questions as we go along, so do use the interactive displays to put down anything that you want to ask the experts here. Now, next up we've got John Stapleton, who's Head of External Affairs at Consultant Sustainable Homes. John, I understand, is going to be talking about best practice in this area and the benefits to housing providers in hard numbers, as well as anything else, of regenerating their stock rather than redeveloping it, but also the wider benefits to society as a whole. Over to you, John.
Thanks so much, Joey. So we are Sustainable Homes. We're a small consultancy advising mainly social landlords in improving their stock and in reducing their environmental impacts. We do this principally through a vehicle called SHIFT, which is a sustainability standard for the housing sector, and it enables organisations to measure, compare and improve their stock and organisations and compare performance with others, and we make recommendations for improvements. So controversially, I would scrap our name actually, and I would replace it with quality, because I think at the end of the day this is what we are talking about. We're talking about refurbishment of properties to a higher standard. And I do think that sometimes when we talk about energy efficiency and sustainability, that it switches people off. So I do think that's something to bear in mind when we talk about anything to do with refurbishment. Similarly, although this is a key driver for government, and it should be with climate change, for most people it's still something of an abstraction. And 2050, when our kind of target for retrofitting homes are going to be sort of coming home to roost, if you like, is an awful long time away, and so is actually 2030 even. And I think even when you talk about bills and cash, which you might have thought would be the most effective way to get people on board with this whole retrofit agenda, it's not as clear cut as you might think. And I think all too often we are reduced to thinking about, to arguing a toss over how much money will be saved off bills, when it's quite a blunt instrument, which also frames the debate on quite narrow terms, which, if they are the only ones in town, will sometimes struggle to convince. And people might say, look, you know, especially with things like insulation, external wall insulation, you know, if the improvements will only pay for themselves in 30 years, then what's the point? And for social landlords, who we work with principally, the incentive is sometimes even less. And tenants will see all of the savings, whilst landlords will see none. So I think there is a really good case to think about these things in a more intelligent way. Yes, we definitely factor in energy bill savings, but we also look to the wider benefits. And this helpful kind of crib sheet is a good way to kind of frame those discussions. I think deep down we all know that more energy efficient, warmer homes are desirable for everyone, beyond just the potential bill savings, and irrespective of whether our collective lack of will is going to bring about climate change catastrophe for our grandchildren. We just haven't articulated it very well. So what I'd like to do is just lob into this discussion just 3 or 4 examples of kind of arguments for retrofit and investing in this sort of stuff, which are kind of a bit more outside the box, if you like. So, believe it or not, government does actually put a value on emissions, or more accurately, their abatement. And yes, someone somewhere deep inside the Treasury actually cares about the environment. But whatever means we can get to harness this mechanism through making the accounting for the measures we take watertight, we need to do, because at the moment we haven't got that mechanism in place. But if we come together as a sector to really make the case that certain measures are, if you like, going to provide concrete savings, then that's the key to making sure that we can actually get some financial benefit from the Treasury. And another factor which rarely comes to light is the potential for a retrofit program which was national in scope to create so many jobs. What about the workers? Forget sort of people's QE or something. Upgrading homes is almost the perfect stimulus, spread evenly throughout the country, providing local jobs in areas of high unemployment, rich in apprenticeships, and plugging a skill shortage of epic proportions, which is afflicting the construction sector at the moment. And then what about the kind of the even wider consideration of where are the UK's energy needs are going to sit in 10, 20, 30 years' time? I mean, there tends to be a lot of navel gazing and sort of punctuated by occasional panic about how we're going to meet our energy needs in the next 20 or 30 years. What will this mean for the geopolitics between UK, Europe, Russia, and the Middle East, oil supplies, and so forth? But there's one very simple, untapped fuel source, I would argue, and that's cutting back on using it in the first place. And if the only way to get energy efficiency treated seriously is to view it as a fuel source in its own right, as has been advocated in a number of reports recently, then we need to go down that road. Darren mentioned some work we've been doing recently, which is to actually try and come up with a concrete link between housing associations and their arrears, which most have an average of 1 million in outstanding rent. 1 in 10 have more than 2 million. So it's a real big cost for housing associations to manage. And that's not including all the admin and associated work that it takes to deal with these arrears. So we know anecdotally from Hasto and a few others that there is a link between the homes that have been retrofitted and a reduced rate of arrears. So this is something that we're looking at as sustainable homes. We're trying to get a real kind of deep evidence base to make sure that we can, go to a finance director and say, look, if we invest in these properties, we can save X amount on our arrears. And as Darren's already touched on, there is a real link between the price of properties and their value, and this is being increasingly recognised by valuers and also mortgage providers. And DEC are looking at this again, as they have done before, to sort of get an updated picture. Finally, the health issue. There's a real big zeitgeist thing at the moment. Around the country, there's various schemes springing up, such as Prescriber Boiler, which recognise that poor housing can be often a cause of ill health in itself. And ill health is not just something we want to prevent for its own sake. Even when we tackle its root causes, we can save the NHS cash, especially at a time of year when it's most under strain, such as now in this cold snap. I really think it is high time we discovered this link. There's Nye Bevan, the so-called father of the NHS, and he knew full well the link between health and housing, and that was reflected in the fact that he was Secretary of State for Health and Housing. And this sort of leads neatly on to best practice and how we get retrofit right. There's been a lot of stories in the press recently about retrofit projects not being undertaken well and the potential health problems that this can lead to. So it's really important that if we're going to do retrofit, we do it well. So what does good look like? Well, it could be this, but when we talk about goods in retrofit, I think it's more important to talk about process from start to completion. And this is not something we can take for granted by any means. So we're all learning all the time, but doing retrofit well is not rocket science. Some of the most valuable insights, in fact, have been provided by a piece of research which is now several years old, which I would recommend as a good starting place to find out about what well-managed retrofit projects should look like. So one of the most important things to consider, again, as Darren has touched on, is that the whole house approach means measures can be prioritised effectively. A balance can be struck between building fabric, minimising so-called thermal bridges, i.e. unwanted heat loss, and energy services. A fabric-first approach is often the most effective. It's important to remember that whole house means making sure that ventilation is not neglected. And a house which is insulated to high heaven but with air quality so low that it causes asthma is obviously no good to anyone. I guess the point to make is when you're designing a house from scratch, no single element is treated in isolation, and the same should be true for retrofit. It's another crucially important factor is using performance targets so that you can work out if what you're doing is performing as it should. There's various standards such as the Retrofit, which Darren's mentioned, also Passive House, but it could also be just something like an air tightness target, something that's measurable at the end, so that you know what you're doing is working, and also if you're the client, you can go back to your contractor and say you need to sort this out because it ain't working. Engage people early on. This should go without saying, but retrofit can obviously be intrusive and disruptive. It's getting better in that respect, and people are learning all the time. But making sure people know what to expect is absolutely crucial. And this extends to the practicalities during the works. What can be done to ensure that if people are to stay in the property during the works, they can combine living there with as much continuity as possible? And there's lots of other things that should be taken into consideration. Contingencies are crucial, as are having simple, clear chains of command and responsibility. Changing specs at the last minute can have a very disruptive effect and store up problems for the future. Off-site construction is something which can really speed things up and are central to the success of models such as Energy Sprung, which is emerging as a potential solution to retrofit and is being piloted in the UK. So just to finish with a vaguely humorous note on improving. I mean, I think moving away from a model in which grant-driven, which is totally grant-driven, which it sometimes feels like it has been over the last few years, is absolutely crucial. That's not to say grants are not important, but if we're waiting for the next grant to come along and not taking action ourselves, we're never going to meet the scale of the challenge. And I also think it does drive bad outcomes in terms of quality. If we want people to take ownership of quality in order to deliver the results. So we want to move away from a grant model towards something of and apologies for this, a kitty, where everyone puts into a pot, if you like a one-pot cooking. We need to sort of capture all these benefits which Darren and I have talked about and really move on to the model. If we rely on homeowners to be converted, we'll be waiting a long time. Similarly, if we wait for government handouts, no agency acting alone will create the critical mass we need. So we need to decide on a model based on clearly defined performance outcomes and then line up the funding based on the benefits, both quantifiable and intangible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John, for that fantastic presentation. I think, again, highlighting the ways that you can build the business case and some of the ways that you would approach that if you're looking to do this kind of project. But also raising some questions there about the funding environment, which maybe we'll be able to get onto in the Q&A, hopefully. Again, I should say before we get to the last presentation, keep the questions flowing in. We've got lots already, but there's still plenty of opportunity to put some more questions, and so it would be great to keep that for the Q&A flowing. Now, last to present, we're going to have David Lawrence, who's Managing Director of Contractor LawTech, which, as I understand it, started in 2004 as an external wall insulation fitter, but has since expanded to become one of the fastest growing general social housing contractors in the UK. David is going to be talking about how partnership working with landlords and tenants can work, as well as how to mitigate the risks of things going wrong in this kind of installation, particularly when you're working in sensitive environments. So, David, take it away.
Thanks, Joey. Very much appreciate having the contractor's view. Graveyard shift as always, but I think it's nice to have the practicalities sometimes of a contractor's view. And some of the stuff I have in my presentation is possibly going to repeat on what's been said, which is somewhat interesting, as I didn't know what the others were going to physically present here today. So I think the key to any retrofit is partnership, and partnership with everybody. Partnership with the contractor is extremely important. Early engagement with the design. The contractors do have a view on the design. They have a view on the practicalities of the design, whether it's possible or not. And I don't think I can stress enough the importance of an early partnership in designing the right retrofit for a particular estate. Early considerations are very, very important with life cycle costings. What are you attending? What does the client want to achieve? What's his end goal? What's the cost effectiveness of the retrofit that he is wishing to carry out? There are many, many experts in the UK, and they are more than happy to help. And I think there's not enough partnership work and information across our industry, and I think I would encourage that to be done a lot more in terms of where people get their information from, expert advice, in helping generate the correct design for the retrofit. But not only that, it's very important on retrofit schemes to engage with the residents. After all, it is their homes that we are refurbishing, and they may be tenants, but the home is their castle, and if we engage with them and they like it and they like what's being done, they are far more likely to look after it after the work has been carried out. And also resident involvement in procurement and getting them involved and engaging in the contract will help the smoothness of the project. It is, however we dress it up, always a relatively difficult thing to refurb, especially while people are in occupation. We can all imagine what a very large refurbishment of our properties would be with us living there, and it's not a nice experience sometimes, and we need to smooth that process out by really involving the residents and making them part of it. And part of that may well be pilot phases on estates, and we've seen that benefit in terms of physically people being able to see what they're going to achieve, what can be achieved, talk to the people that were in the pilot phase, understand what could have been done better, what went well. And I also think that as funding becomes less important, we've touched on that already, that it's important to look for different partners in the scheme of a retrofit project. And so partnering, I think, is absolutely key to obtaining a good retrofit experience. We've already touched on some of the benefits, and I think that energy efficiency, which has been touched on here, certainly is going to be a major part of any estate regeneration, upgrading stock to the current standards or beyond the current standards. And there's an interesting piece of work specifically on insulation, which we've touched on here today by the IPPR, which was a report done just over a year ago, but late 2013. And detailing to some degree the benefits of energy efficiency and insulation, We've already touched on the health benefits from sustainable here today, but also there are other improvements, and not forgetting estate regeneration is probably an aesthetics thing as well. We can refurbish properties that were a 1960s estate without demolishing them to turn them into an area that doesn't look like a 1960s estate. That is absolutely possible. And it also improves the community as a whole. We've already touched on employment and rejuvenating the area. We've also seen a significant psychological impact in the way residents live their life within the community. They have pride in a new looking estate, and they feel healthier, wealthier, through energy saving bills, but also through living in a warm home. And certain schemes that we've seen in the past, which are now don't exist, the Green Deal, etc. They had a place, in my opinion, to try and drive this forward. Maybe some tweaking needed to be done, but these sort of concepts of providing energy efficiency with estate regeneration, I think, can work very well on estates. And we know that the Prime Minister recently stated £140 million for 100 estates. How much £1.4 million per estate would go, I'm not quite sure. However, retrofit certainly is a cost-efficient way of regenerating estates. In terms of what we can do with the aesthetics, brighter cladding, landscaping is also an important consideration. We found it's not just the building, it's how you design everything around it, and lighting and making the whole estate more user-friendly. No dark alleyways for criminals. But no question that retrofit does have its challenges, and recently we've seen an influx of money through funding schemes such as CESP and after that ECO, and what we saw that led to was potentially the free money outstripping the thought process in the design. And it was a case of some schemes were installed at practically no cost off the back of some eco funding, and the eco funding by its nature is a relatively short period of time, and that doesn't necessarily coincide with estate regeneration, which takes some time to design. And therefore we saw some schemes going ahead where not as much thought process in the upfront design had taken place, and the main driver was the funding. But this funding is now not there, it's drying up. The ECO has been watered down, and it's been watered down further, so from 2017 onwards it will be further watered down. So the investment on this front is becoming less and less important, and I would say that I would encourage people to see the benefits of funding as a bonus and potentially use it for wish list items, but concentrate on the design of the retrofit and the estate regeneration first, and any funding can be treated as a bonus after that. And I think you'll find that way that the estate regeneration will be a much better design. Difficulty with some engagement on large scale retrofit with utility businesses, which we have to engage with, and the initial ECO and CESP, there were significant discussions between some utility businesses and contractors, and being able to understand how they work and how the installers work was relatively difficult, but a lot of that's been ironed out now. And we also need to get back to how do people pay for this, and especially leaseholders, and potentially the Green Deal no longer there. Is there an alternative to a pay-as-you-save scheme that the government are looking at, and how that can move forward? One thing I would say is that I think that estate regeneration has the ability to refurbish the structures to an EPCC or better. I think we should set ourselves higher goals, but certainly when considering energy efficiency and thermal upgrades, the design and how the building is going to react, and how the building is going to breathe, and how the building is going to be used is extremely important. The residents are used to blocking up vents and closing trickle vents and blocking every single draft that property has, and when the upgrade occurs, the ventilation no longer becomes their enemy, it becomes their friend, and it's very important that we absolutely change the way that people live in those houses. It's an education process for sure, but ventilation and moisture is a key area that is certainly overlooked in retrofit, especially when doing thermal upgrades on properties. And again, I would reiterate, ask the people that are the experts, because not enough of that happens in certain areas of refurbishment. However, you know, retrofit sometimes can be a compromise. Some things need to be weighed up in terms of its cost effectiveness to the gain that can be made. And as I touched on earlier, I think funding rules need to be changed. I think all the funding mechanisms that the government have developed so far are market-driven funding mechanisms. We have a utility business that is got to get rid of an amount of carbon in a period of time, and that period of time may not sit with a long project such as an estate regeneration. Typically the schemes up until now have been 2 to 3 years. And it may well be that that's too short a period for the estate to be regenerated and to obtain the correct funding. And so I think the government need to look at the way that the funding mechanisms are and how they fit in with estate regeneration and how they can make them a little bit more long-term in the future. The design of a retrofit is key. It may not be perfect, and it sometimes doesn't sit in with building regulations. Building regulations are relatively a strange thing, that they're predominantly for new build, and on a retrofit project you can have one regulation that, as a result of that regulation, then causes an issue with another regulation, and sometimes that doesn't fit in. And I think there needs to be a little bit of learning and understanding of that, and how we de-stress the buildings when we carry out refurbishment. And one thing I know Darren touched on earlier, but again I probably can't stress this enough, is I don't think many people look at fire enough when it comes to refurbishment. We have a masonry structure, and on certain estates they're high-rise, medium-rise, even low-rise, and when we are carrying out that refurbishment, during the job we are carrying out works. What is the risk of fire during the works, not just at the end when we've finished? And what is the risk of fire? We've seen recently in Dubai a very large hotel fire, and on high rises absolutely we must take that into consideration, and I'm not necessarily convinced that that's one of the top design considerations that people take into account. So in summary, I'd say that design is key to everything, and I'll repeat that: design is key to everything. Procurement options. The clients do have choices on procurement options. I'd say that it's not necessarily the traditional way is always best. Certainly ask the experts. We're always here, willing to help. I guess in return, the marketeer in me would say, you know, we'd like an opportunity to tender for the works. We're not asking for anything more in return as a contractor, but we are certainly here to help and give our practical experiences. Life cycle costs are key. When we refurb a building, it's a 1960s building, it may be older Victorian, it's been there a long time. When we refurbish it to this extent, to full estate regeneration, we must consider that we are refurbishing it to last another 100 years, not 20 years, and have to keep redoing it and keep redoing it. It's by far the most cost-effective way of dealing with it. And if the structure is sound and in a good enough condition, then by far, in my opinion, the most cost-effective way is to retrofit the building. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David, for that presentation. Really interesting kind of practical take on what it's actually like if you're rolling out some of these projects. What are the issues you've got to deal with in terms of helping tenants get through it, how you manage getting the built performance to kind of match up to the design performance. Now we've got just over 20 minutes for some questions. We've already got lots of questions in, but do keep them coming. I wanted to start off with one that we've had posed by Anthony Goldsby from Piper Whitlock, asking, are there any benchmarks for the cost of expenditure for retrofit versus the energy savings that you can get? I don't know if this is either something that Darren or John would be able to pick up on, but I think also it goes to that wider question of helping people to build the business case. So why should they be doing refurbishment rather than redevelopment? What can you point people to, Darren?
Yeah, in terms of benchmark, that's what our return on investment tool is all about. It uses SAP and it uses the current cost of energy to calculate the actual return on investment and compare the before installation and after installation. We can actually sit down with an architect or a social housing provider, run through house types, property types, and in each individual one, put the measures that you want to actually install in their properties and see what it does to the actual energy bills of that property. So from that, then you can work out the return on investment. We've also added in there the comfort factors as well, so that the return on investment is as close as possible to reality.
Fantastic, John. I think you wanted to come in here.
Yeah, I mean, we run a tool called Chrome, Carbon Reduction Options for Housing Managers, which basically takes a whole house approach, if you like, to all the individual measures that can be installed as part of a retrofit scheme, and then plotting basically the payback period. So if you're talking about, what am I going to get by when in terms of payback, then there's definitely, I mean, ours is one tool, but there are other tools out there that can actually give you a predictable sort of return on investment and how quickly you'll see the savings made back.
Fantastic, thanks for that. We've also had a number of questions come in around, I suppose what I could broadly say is both the kind of policy priority for retrofit as opposed to refurbishment, and the client view. Why would a client do this when ultimately it will be their tenants that would see the benefit in terms of reduced bills? So we've got one from Benjamin Simonite from Nottingham Trent. He's saying retrofit is not seen as a priority by many. People are more likely to set aside money for luxuries and aesthetic improvements rather than energy-led retrofit. How can people be better motivated to do this? And then he asks a supplementary, how can people finance it? John, I don't know if this is something you can pick up on.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I agree with that sentiment. Actually, I mean, I don't think there's any room for naivety in this respect. And we know certainly in social landlords, no matter how kind of brilliant the energy efficiency performance that you're offering people, they will always go for a new kitchen, given a choice. And I think the same is true for the homeowner. So it is definitely a challenge. I think some of the language, as I was sort of intimated earlier, should and can change about what this is actually about. Is it about energy efficiency, or is it about actually just upgrading your home and investing in it? And I think, again, when we get onto the territory of bills, that's kind of a reductive approach, and we get, things get judged on a very narrow basis. Having said all that, I do think we can sell retrofit as home refurbishment. I think it is possible. I think certainly with things like Energy Sprong in Holland, it is all about regeneration. It's nothing about energy. It just so happens that after the refurbishment has taken place, people have no bills, and that's pretty good. So I do think we can do it, but I also think that we need some element of stick from the government. I think we need. It doesn't need to be a hard stick, if you like. It could be a nudge, but we do need some clear direction from government, and this is something they could do now without even spending any money, which sounds like an attractive proposition to me. To set a really clear long-term target, or even, dare I say it, regulation, that by a certain date you will have to get your home up to scratch. You know, with caveats, that's fine. But I think that this is a case for, you know, the benefits of retrofit are sort of multitude, but we do also need to do this for X, Y, and Z reason, and that can come down to, you know, energy security, can come down to climate change. So I do think we need a combination of carrot and stick. As far as how do we finance retrofit, I think that this is where performance and retrofit is so crucial. I think as soon as we can get into a position where we can measure performance and make sure that homes are performing as they're designed to do, which we are not very close to at the moment, but again, sounds like I'm being paid, but Energy Sprong is a model that enables you to guarantee performance. Once you can guarantee performance, then you can start actually doing a real pay-as-you-save, which is sort of, if you like, gilt-edged. And once you can predict savings, then you can actually leverage off, and you can go and talk to banks and insurers, and you can actually start to leverage off the savings that are, at the end of the day, are going out of the window in the form of wasted energy, which serves no one apart from the energy companies.
David, how are you finding persuading clients to be interested in this kind of approach? Are they going for this?
I think they're gradually coming round to the correct answer. You know, I think we need to look at what retrofit is and what it does. You know, why do people spend a lot of money doing their kitchen up? I guess is because the end value of their property, their investment, which is probably the biggest one they ever make, has gone up in value. And there needs to be a little bit more robustness in reports about value from estate agents and surveyors in terms of energy efficiency of a property and its value and the link thereof. And I think that if that became the common norm, it certainly would encourage retrofit up the agenda, because people tend to spend the money wisely and it's an investment. But I also don't think there is a one-size-fits-all category here. Certainly the Green Deal did have a go. I'll give a brief example where that doesn't work. An example where we had a private householder that had a Green Deal assessment carried out and clearly was in need of a refurbishment, was willing to do something on a pay-as-you-save. But when the occupancy assessment was carried out, the calculation worked out that they were going to save £21 per year, and therefore they wouldn't be able to have the pay-as-you-save refurbishment. And why was the figure so low? Well, the person in question boiled his kettle in the morning, and that's all they used in terms of power, and they used that to wash, have a cup of tea, and have the entirety of the electric and gas off all day. And those are the people that need help, certainly. But the Green Deal clearly didn't work for him in that case. So that one size didn't fit all. So there just needs to be a little bit more of a thought process in maybe different mechanisms that help each other, for sure. But I think one of the big drivers will be value of property after the energy efficiency and retrofit work.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that one, David, because we've had a question from Julian Record asking about the uplift in value that I think both Darren and John quoted that you get on properties with higher EPC ratings. He's saying, where has the 6% increase in capital value come from improvement from EPC D to B? And he says, as a chart surveyor, he doesn't recognise this. Darren, what would you say to that? How do you see this? Where do you see this uplift in value kind of coming from?
In short, I think you can get that detail from the DEC website. But I think what you've got to bear in mind as well is that within an EWI system, yes, it's primarily about thermal performance, but there's a great aesthetic upgrade as well. So we do see, particularly private homeowners that are adopting it. Yeah, they're not adopting it as readily as social housing, but the value of their house increases if they have an EWI system put on it.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah, just to say, yeah.
This is John.
Yeah, sorry. This is quite a comprehensive piece of research that DEC undertook about 3 years ago. It's being undertaken again this year. I understand there is that RICS do recognise energy efficiency as part of the metric for analysing the value of properties. Willing to be corrected, especially if you are a chartered surveyor, Julian. But I think it is a factor. And so this comprehensive piece of research which DEC undertook, it varied around the country, but that was one of the headlines from it. And it was careful to exclude things which were not relevant. It's quite tricky to obviously to attribute that uplift in value to energy efficiency works, but they were very scrupulous in making sure that it was a real link.
So the work it sounds like has been done there. We've got a couple of related questions here from Sarah Price at Encraft around these changes in government policy, which we haven't gone into in much depth at the moment. There's, as I mentioned at the start, George Osborne has offered councils and up to £2.3 billion in loans from the government, which would obviously have to be paid back for estate regeneration, but we don't yet know much detail about what terms those loans will come on and what they'll be for. And David Cameron has also offered some further money. So Sarah says, how do you think recent changes in government policy will affect social landlords' ability to fund retrofit of energy efficiency measures? And she also adds, given that the 2.3 billion in loans is for estate regeneration and new housing estates, how much of this do you think will actually be used for regeneration as opposed to wholesale redevelopment? John, maybe this is one for you to think about first.
Yeah, I think it's an open question for this 2.3 billion. I mean, it sounds great, doesn't it? The fact that it's a loan, I don't think many people have necessarily picked up on. And I know there's been sort of talk in the press about, is it going to work for local authorities and social landlords to actually get their hands on this money? So I think, it's definitely a danger. I think if we end up with loads of demolition and loads of rebuilding, I think that would be a bad thing. I totally agree with David. I think there's this real kind of political aversion to the idea of refurbishment because you can't see beyond a kind of derelict grey estate on a grey day with some real issues of deprivation to what it could be. Just on the rent cap, I mean, yeah, it's. I think this is why I think we need a new model, because I think if we carry on as we are, then yes, it is going to really set us back a long time. And if we just kind of if social landlords retrench because there's no grants on the table and they don't sort of take a long-term view of how to manage their assets, which I think is absolutely crucial, by the way, to getting retrofit done and improving the quality of estates, then I think we will stand still and nothing will happen. And this is where I come back to to this. Let's really think about what the model is. Let's get the model right, so that we can guarantee performance, and then let's go around and let's put money into a kitty. Let's get money from the CCG. Let's get money from the local authority. Let's also actually consider getting money from the tenants. I know it sounds a bit controversial, but I think it's perfectly in order. If your home is going to be retrofitted to standard, which means that you are saving, say, £500 a year off your bills, that you should a little bit of that, not all of it, but a little bit of that should be returned, if you like, to your landlord, to your social landlords, and then to be reinvested in other properties. I think that's perfectly in order. If you benefit from the investment to the tune of £500, then why not use those savings to benefit other people on the same estate? So I think there's no one size fits all answer to that question. I think it is case of going back to the performance model, making sure that works, and then once we've got that in place, then we can start looking around for alternative sources of funding.
Okay, Darren, did you want to pick up on that issue? I mean, how excited are the potential clients, the local authorities, in your experience, by the idea of this new funding coming, and is it spurring them to talk about estate regeneration?
They're certainly talking about estate regeneration. I wouldn't use the word excited yet. I don't think there's enough detail in terms of how the different schemes that have been announced and the loans are the mechanisms to actually use and access these. But we've worked on a project in South Wales called Arbed, and they really, I think, have sort of set the benchmark for how you get funding from different areas and deliver successful refurbishment schemes on an estate scale. They look at doing 200 to 400 houses at a time. They involve social housing providers in the area, and they access different levels of funding from different areas, ERDF, Welsh Government, utilities, etc. So I think it will be about organisations getting together in areas, pooling their knowledge and putting together a great business case and attracting funding from other areas. I agree with John. It's not going to be an overnight solution. It's going to be about putting together a good business case for your scheme when it comes along. But I think what we've got to do is we've got to wait and see the actual detail behind the government announcement before we make any judgments.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Darren. We've got about 5 minutes left. We've had a set of quite interesting queries, which I imagine possibly Darren and David might want to pick up on, around the kind of quality of external wall insulation works and how that can be made to be up to the higher standards that we'd expect. So Joe Malone from Malone Associates said, what can be done to implement some genuinely independent oversight and regulation on the quality of works, and questioning whether in different places people are being offered external wall insulation with a differing variety of years of guarantee. Maybe David, you can talk about your experience with this.
You can do, yeah. Good question. At the moment, there's a review going on called the Bomfield Review, and that follows up from Peter Hansford, the Chief Construction Advisor's review in solid wall. So there are reports out there, and have a look at those. Where I would start on that question is that the funded market has seen an explosion in so-called installers of solid wall insulation. And to give you that example, prior to Eco and the Green Deal starting, I could probably say that there are around about 75 installers across the UK, and that then within the space of 18 months ended up being 800 installers, which in reality the barriers to entry to Eco and Green Deal were set far too low, and there wasn't enough scrutiny over the quality of the installer, and there wasn't a good enough standard for that installer. So in some circumstances there have been issues, certainly with regards to the installation of solid wall insulation. And as I said in my presentation, it all boils down to the engagement with the experts at the time, because there are good businesses out there that know how to provide this and know how to install it correctly, know how to design it correctly. And too many times the traditional route is either A, can you put external wall insulation on this building with no specification, with no design input, with no thought process, and just get the funding, get it on the wall, and I'll start saving money. And secondly, I think that there needs to be much more engagement with the specialist installers and the specialist system designers in terms of design, and what is it that you want. As we seen before, the mineral wool, stone wool is non-combustible, it's breathable, it's got acoustic benefits. Do you want that? Do you want something else? So there are other things. In terms of guarantees, dare I say, I'm on the board of a business called Swiga, which is the Solid Wool Insurance Guarantee Agency, and under this current schemes they provide a 25-year warranty on the systems. I would say that my experience on clients' understanding of warranties is relatively poor, and that it almost seems that a lot of people, when they receive a warranty, don't read the terms and conditions at the back of it and think, well, that's great, I've got a 25-year warranty or a 10-year warranty, whatever the warranty is from the provider. I would certainly encourage people to read the terms and conditions of that warranty and actually what is it you're getting the warranty for, and then decide on which warranty provider to go with. I wouldn't just accept the warranty. So there are lots of people with lots of information to engage, and I know we're very short for time, so I just encourage people to say, look, ask the experts, and you'll get the correct answer.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for that, David. I was hoping to bring in Darren there, but we are, as you say, we are running out of time. So I just it leaves for me to thank everyone for listening and thank all of our panelists for taking part in a fascinating discussion this morning. Thank you very much.